strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. This week, I decided to have a little treat since, it's a little vacation time, and I thought, I'm going to watch a movie. And I watched Wicked. Have any of you seen it yet? Yeah. So for those of you who have not seen it, Wicked is the prequel to The Wizard of Oz, to tell the story of how the Wicked Witch of the West became who she was seen to be. So prequels are those kinds of books or movies or plays in which they try to tell a fuller story, right? There's the given story, the Wizard of Oz in this case, and then we want to know more. Who is this person? What were they really like before this story? So, what are some of your favorite or least favorite prequels? Does anyone have a favorite prequel or a least favorite? I have my least favorite prequels. That would be the Star Wars series. Yeah. Yeah. So, it got me thinking that our Gospels are like prequels, with the original story being Mark, and every Gospel that followed Mark is a prequel. So think about it. Mark is the original oldest Gospel, canonical Gospel. And the way the story begins is Jesus is an older man, right? He's a mature man in his 30s, and Mark says that the prophets had proclaimed that there would be a Messiah. And here Jesus comes, fully grown, and he gets baptized, and then he starts his big ministry. So that's the original nugget. And then it looks like Matthew, Luke, and John each decided to write a prequel to Mark. So Matthew takes it up next, and Matthew's like, well, I want to know a little more about Jesus' life. I feel like everyone needs to know a little more about Jesus' life and what he really meant to us Jews. So he took Mark's gospel and went a step back and said, not just is Jesus the longed-for Messiah of the prophets, he's the longed-for Messiah of the Jewish people, beginning with Abraham. So he does Jesus' genealogy all the way back to Abraham. But then, the gospel spreads. It's going out into the Gentile world. And Luke takes up the mantle and says, no, I want to write a prequel to Matthew. All the way back. So he starts the genealogy of Jesus all the way back to Adam and Eve. So that Luke is telling the gospel story of Jesus, not just as salvation that is the culmination of the prophetic tradition, and not just as the culmination of the tradition of the Jews beginning with Abraham, but of all of humanity beginning with Adam and Eve. A prequel. Now, John was like, oh, I got this. It's the prequel of prequels. Not just the prophetic tradition, not just the Jewish tradition, not even the tradition about the salvation of humanity, but all the way back to the salvation of all of creation. And so John goes not just back to the beginning of creation, but the beginning of beginnings, the absolute beginning before creation. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this is the prequel of prequels, to tell a salvation history that is big and wide and broad, that encompasses not just people, but all of creation. For God so loved the world. But John gives us some very heady language based in philosophy, right? In the beginning was the Logos. And it is the Sunday after Christmas Day, so I'm not going to make you think too hard. I don't want to think too hard, but just a little bit about the Logos. It's sometimes translated as the Word, as we hear today, right? In the beginning was the Word. Sometimes it's translated as the reason. In the beginning was reason. But my favorite translation of Logos is, in the beginning was the discourse. The discourse. In the beginning was the conversation. In the beginning was a holy conversation, and that conversation was with God and was God. That's a strange way to think about what was at the beginning. In the beginning was a relationship, because in order to have a conversation, you're not talking to yourself unless you're a little, right? Like you are in communication. You are in relationship. So in the beginning, God created so as to be in conversation with all of creation, to be in a give and take, a back and forth. How many of you ever had conversations in which you couldn't get a word in? I do recognize that I am giving the sermon and you all have to listen to me. And then there are conversations in which I have felt really listened to. Have you ever had that kind of conversation where the person who is in the conversation is deeply listening to you? How did that feel? Imagine in the beginning was the conversation in which God spoke you into being and then listened to you and wanted to know you. That's another form of creation, to be really listened to. When I have felt really listened to, sometimes I feel like a new being afterwards. And could it be that we are also invited in that conversation to enter silence and really listen to God? In the beginning was the holy conversation in which God really listened to each particular being. And then each being, out of that love, that experience of love, didn't feel the need to keep talking, but went into silence and listened to God. That is what I want you to think about today. Is this one verse. To think about it as, in the beginning was the holy conversation. In the beginning, someone listened and someone got to speak. And it was a back and forth. That's also Christmas. Amen.